The US has condemned Russia for conducting a dangerous and irresponsible missile test that it says endangered the crew aboard the International Space Station. The test blew up one of Russia's own satellites, creating debris that forced the ISS crew to shelter in capsules. The station currently has 7 crew members on board, 4 Americans, a German and 2 Russians. Well, earlier my colleague David Eads spoke to former NASA engineer Keith Cowing and asked how risky it was to undertake such an unannounced missile test in space.
Well, it's risky. It's also baffling. You've got thousands of pieces of space junk in an orbit that will overlap the space station. And oddly enough, I mean, the Russians have 2 of their own people up there. Half the space station is built of Russian stuff. They launched this thing knowing that they'd have to go through it. And, meanwhile, you get this tweet, which your presenter read, which was a bad translation, which really much says, well, we're in the green zone. What does that mean? Meanwhile, NASA didn't say anything until the end of the day. So there's something else going on here that we're not seeing behind the scenes. And, you can speculate all you want. But the real question is, why would Russia endanger its own people? That's what's baffling.
Well, I mean, it is the test of an anti-satellite missile. I suppose they're taking the opportunity. They will depict it as you say, whatever the green zone is, depicting it as something not terribly risky. Maybe it's fair to argue that the Americans would go the other way and heighten that sense of anxiety.
Perhaps, but if you wanted to test this, you could have picked another satellite somewhere else where the debris was. It's like jumping in front of an ambulance or a school bus. I mean, it's like pick a worse target, please. And now everybody's going to wonder, well, why did they do that? What is the follow-up to this? And tonight you've got the astronauts and the cosmonauts sleeping in their escape craft because there is still a threat. That threat is not going away. As a matter of fact, it will get worse over time, and it'll affect every nation's spacecraft. So this is a lot of people are really scratching their heads over this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our science correspondent, Jonathan Amos, used a similar analogy describing a missile test like this as a form of madness, simply because it's so uncontrollable and there's enough of this junk up there.
Well, there's already too much of this stuff. And here we are, everybody's talking about putting constellations up there of thousands of satellites. And that's an issue in and of itself, except that's somewhat controllable with the traffic, monitoring in thought and planning. But this is just borders on terrorism to a certain extent, because you're just wantonly blowing something up with the fragments going wherever they wish. And it's a threat that will continue to bother people for years. Every time you do this, it's a decade-long risk or longer before that stuff goes somewhere.